Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. Welcome to Friday. For those of you in the New York, New Jersey area, I know you had an earthquake, but take it from me. I'm a California born and bred, well, not born, but bred, and this is really nothing. Come on, people, grow up. 7.0, 7.2? Okay, that's worth something. But in all seriousness, hope you weren't shaken. Hope you weren't upset. There are things to be upset by, however, and it's not the minor earthquake this morning. First, in Israel, we've certainly had a change of tone and of pace. If you recall, earlier in the week, there was the tragic killing of the World Central Kitchen workers by an Israeli barrage. And the President Biden, really took it to the Israelis for the first time. He really laid into them and said, this is not acceptable. And more important, what he said is, our policy is going to be dependent upon what you do. And that was the first time that he introduced the idea that our support for Israel would be conditional on them getting their act together. It wasn't simply this one tragic accident, as tragic as it was. It was that there's been 200 aid workers who have been killed. And it is obvious to military observers, to the administration, to just about everyone, that Israel has not taken steps to deconflict, that is, to make sure these incidents don't occur, with aid workers. And this goes to the whole issue as to whether the continued killing, the continued war, is accomplishing anything. The law of wars require that, yes, there may be times when civilians are harmed, but, and this is the condition, but the incidental killing of civilians must be proportional to whatever military gain you are attaining. In other words, if they're not accomplishing anything at this point, then you cannot justify the killing that is incidental to acts of war. Whether they're a complete accident, whether they are, quote, inevitable because you're still continuing to shatter buildings and to try to pick off terrorists, at some point, the diminishing returns require that you stop. And the president, I think, really had enough of the current government's approach. And sure enough, within a few hours, frankly, of his private call with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israelis announced a few measures, including opening up another corridor for humanitarian aid, including some punishments for those people who messed up in this case. But will that be enough? Well, the president also indicated he wanted a concerted effort and Hamas's cooperation too. But I think there is a growing sense, both in Washington as well as in the streets of Israel, where those protests have moved from Saturday nights to the week to multi-weekday protests, that Bibi Netanyahu may be continuing this war, perpetuating this war, for reasons other than military necessity, quite frankly. In other words, to maintain his grip on power. For the first time, one of his coalition partners, actually a member of the war cabinet who's in the opposition, Benny Gantz, announced that they should have new elections in September. Now, frankly, I would have preferred he said July or June, because you know that in essence gives Netanyahu a green light to keep going all the way up to September. But perhaps the increased pressure from the United States, the increasing intensity, frequency, size of those protests in Israel will have some impact on them. And perhaps we will finally get to some cooperative effort to bring the hostilities to an end, to get the hostages back, and to begin to seriously plan for a post-war Gaza. We'll see. But I think the president took an important step today, and I think the results speak for themselves. When he does speak up, Israel does listen. So we have that development. The best news of the week: no labels is no more. They have no candidate. It is a no-go. And this was not by happenstance. Many, many people undertook the effort to publicize that this was not a good faith effort for a third party to actually win, that any such candidate would be a spoiler, would have no chance to win, and most importantly, that it would detract from Biden's vote. Think about this. The Republican candidate is unlikely to get more than 46, 47%. That's true whether Donald Trump is on the ticket, whether Mitt Romney, who got 47% when he ran in 2012. So all the president has to do is get a little bit more than that, say 48%, 49%, understanding that we have an electoral college. But if there are serious third-party candidates that draw off 5, 10% of the vote, he won't have enough to beat Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump cannot command an electoral majority. And that was the danger with no labels. Many people, including the moderate Democratic group Third Way, made efforts to reach out to potential candidates who one by one turned them down, who put out polling data showing that this was impossible, made media appearances, really did their best to discourage this movement. And they were rewarded this week. We were all rewarded that when they announced they would not run. Now, it is true that RFK Jr. remains in the race. He is less potent than No Labels because he's a crack bomb and he's approaching the election and he's excoriating President Biden from a fringe position. That sounds more like Trump, frankly, and some of Trump's allies. But in point of fact, anything that really deters people and detracts from this large coalition from center right all the way to left, the pro-democracy coalition, poses a threat. And it would certainly be better off if RFK Jr. were not out there. Now, he's only on a couple ballots so far, and we hope it stays that way. But this is a good sign. This is a positive sign. Something we have learned from other countries facing authoritarian threats, Brazil, Poland, is that the pro-democracy coalition has to stick together. If they splinter, if they cannot cooperate, then the authoritarian figure will win, even though he may not have a majority. So that was a really important, really positive development. There was another positive development, and that was over 300,000 new jobs for the month of March. That's a lot. That's about twice what was anticipated. Now, that may make the Federal Reserve a little bit nervous about cutting down interest rates, lowering interest rates, because they're concerned that the economy may be overheating. But by and large, this is very, very good news. It says that our economy continues to generate enormous jobs. Wages are now significantly outpacing the rate of inflation, which is absolutely essential for households to be able to afford housing, food, and the rest of their life's expenses. So this was tremendous news. 15 million jobs created in this presidency. That's far more than Donald Trump ever did, and it's more than any other president has done in 4 years. So that is going very well. Now, there were also some legal developments this week. I'll start with the more positive ones first. Jeffrey Clark, you remember him? He was a lawyer in the Justice Department who Donald Trump wanted to make acting attorney general until he found out there would be a rebellion in the Justice Department. He was front and center in the plot to enthrall, entrance, entice these phony electors to send in alternate slates and to get Vice President Pence to throw out the real slate, which was for President Biden, and count these votes, therefore stealing the presidency. Jeffrey Clark was front and center. In fact, he helped draft these letters to various states falsely stating that there had been irregularities that we have to look into. Well, he is now up for disbarment, just like John Eastman was up for disbarment in California. Well, Jeffrey Clark's is taking place in Washington, D.C., where he's a member of the Washington, D.C. bar. And lo and behold, this week, they recommended that he needs to be held over for impeachment proceedings. This isn't a decision. This is simply a recommendation that he goes forward to the next step, which is a full-blown hearing on his disbarment, not impeachment, but disbarment. We also had a ruling from Judge McAfee. He is the presiding judge in Fulton County. That's the Florida election interference case, the phony electors and the effort to pressure Mr. Raffensperger. Well, Judge McAfee had another one of these ridiculous Trump claims about the First Amendment. This is all about my First Amendment rights. And he held, like every other judge in every other case has held, that no, you don't have a First Amendment right to commit crimes. The easy example, if I go into a bank and said, it's a stick up, give me your money, that's not protected by the First Amendment, that's a crime. So the notion is silly, but it's central to Trump's martyrdom. Remember, he is trying to make himself look like the victim. He is trying to tell his supporters that he's being muzzled by the deep state, that this is all about his freedom, his constitutional rights. It's nothing of the sort, and Judge McAfee, thankfully, rejected that. Now, those are the positive legal developments, along with Judge Merchan in New York, who expanded the gag order on Trump, told him if he kept this up, he was going to lose the ability to access information about the jurors, which would put him at a disadvantage. And he rejected a bunch more of these efforts to stall the trial. Trump is re-raising the same issues. He's re-raising motions that have already been dismissed. He does not want to go forward in the worst way. And the next gambits will be, I don't know, the earthquake. There's speculation he may try to fire his lawyers and delay the trial that way. I don't think anything is going to work. I think next week he's finally going to face the music. So all those things are good things. What's not a good thing? Judge Cannon in Florida. She has, to begin with, about a dozen critical motions that she has refused to rule on. That's unusual for a judge. She's, in essence, not doing her job. And why is she not doing her job? Because she knows when she rules the way she wants to, which is in favor of Donald Trump, on very basic issues that really should not be complicated, are no-brainers, that Jack Smith will take the case up on appeal and, moreover, ask for her recusal. So things came to a little bit of a head this week when he went to her and demanded, frankly, that she give an answer one way or another. Does the Presidential Records Act, which is the act that says you can keep your private papers, but everything that's a public paper has to go to the archives, whether that provides any kind of defense to the Espionage Act. This is nuts. All of that hullabaloo about the Presidential Act Records Act is utterly irrelevant to the issue about whether he took national secrets with him. Nothing of that is personal. And if he claimed they were personal, it would be bizarre and unprecedented, and he shouldn't have had national secrets if he had national secrets before, and he certainly should have left them at the White House. It's a dumb argument. She has been entertaining it seriously, and in fact, she asked the parties to discuss two possible jury instructions. We're not anywhere near jury instructions. We don't have a motions in limine. We don't have a trial date. We have nothing. And so she's wanting them to plunge into this esoteric discussion when she assumes that the Presidential Records Act could be a defense. And that's just wrong. Well, Jack Smith had had enough. And what he did is he responded to this direction from the judge by saying, I'm not playing this game. You need to end this argument. You need to disallow this, or I am going to take you up to the 11th Circuit. It's a pretty bold kind of a filing for him. Well, wouldn't you know, she came back and said, okay. Well, just for now, I'm going to say that the Presidential Records Act doesn't apply. But I could reconsider, and we could take this up again in trial. That's not answering the question. And moreover, it holds open the possibility of something occurring that Jack Smith and many observers have been worrying about all along. And that is this. once you impanel a jury, the judge can direct a verdict, can make all sorts of bizarre rulings, and you cannot appeal and reverse without risking a double jeopardy attaching. In other words, as soon as the jury is impaneled, double jeopardy will attach. If the judge throws the case out, you're done. You cannot appeal that once the jury is in place. And that's because having had a jury in place, if you appeal and then go back, that's double jeopardy. I know that sounds bizarre. How can a judge let you get all the way up to trial, get a jury in place, and then sabotage your case if you're the prosecutor with no recourse? That's how the system works. And that's what everyone, I think, who's an objective observer, an informed observer, thinks is going on. She is setting him up for that kind of situation. So what does he do? Well, there are a couple possibilities. First of all, he could still appeal this order because she really didn't answer his question, and also take up all of the other motions that she is just sitting on and doing nothing, and ask the 11th Circuit for a writ of mandamus. That means an order to tell her to rule on these cases and, oh, by the way, recuse. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is, as we do get closer to trial, if we ever get close to trial, that he files a motion in limine. This is a motion to exclude evidence that essentially says he can't bring any of these crackpot theories into trial. And if she rules against him on those, that's clearly appealable and he'll move to recuse. And if she tries not to answer those, then he goes up to the 11th Circuit and again makes a plea for an order for a writ of mandamus and to excuse her. But we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be playing these games. The judge should have made decisive rulings on easy to decide issues. We should have had a trial date. We should have been moving promptly towards a hearing on this important national security issue. We should have had a clear path to a jury decision, and we don't, because she's a hack. She's a not very experienced, not very smart hack, but she's a hack. And this is a real problem. And it will be a test for the 11th Circuit, which, although conservative, is very concerned about issues like national security and allowing someone to take national security secrets with them when they leave the White House. And I think it's really up to them to see if the judiciary can police itself. Is there a way to control a judge who's completely out of control, who is obviously sabotaging a case? We're going to find out as time goes on. And then let's remember, we still have the Supreme Court that is waiting for its hearing on the immunity case. That's going to come up later this month in April, and they're going to decide whether Trump is absolutely immune from anything that happened when he was president, in essence knocking out all of these criminal cases, or whether, let's get real, a president cannot be immune from criminal prosecution for anything he does in office. They'll have to draw some line between real central duties to the presidency, like a declaration of war or determination of economic policy, and activities that clearly have nothing to do with his duties, like refusing to leave office, like trying to get himself reelected. Those aren't presidential duties. Those aren't core to what he does as president, and there's no way he can be immune from prosecution when he commits crimes in that context. So we're going to hear that later on. It's a lot of law, isn't it? And I think it becomes increasingly clear that Donald Trump's campaign is these cases. He's not campaigning the way President Biden is. He's not traveling all over the country. He's had only about 2 events since he theoretically wrapped up the nomination. He's not out there campaigning. He lacks, I think, the mental wherewithal, the physical strength, the organization, the money to go out there and hold events. So what he's doing is he's performing in each one of these court cases, whether it's on the courtroom steps, whether it's tweeting, doing whatever the Truth Social equivalent is. All of this is designed to make the case that he's a martyr, and that's why you have to elect him. And oh, by the way, if you elect him, then he can't be punished for these crimes. That's what this is all about. But you can stop him. Yes, you can. You can make sure you vote. You can make sure people you know vote. You can volunteer. You can give money, time to the cause of pro-democracy and the cause of making sure the only person who can stop him, who can stop Donald Trump, who is President Biden, gets elected. So do your part. Don't lose hope. And if you like this program, you like our other programs, you can click right there. Tell your friends. They can listen. They can follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.